Namaste and a warm welcome to the Ex-Christian Show, the insider view of Christianity from the outside. Ladies and gentlemen, I am back in conversation with Raka Sudhakar ji. After those bone-chilling insights that he gave us in the previous video about the world of proselytization, the strategies of the church and how pastors go out into the field to proselytize, Sudhakar ji is back in the studio with us to talk about a less explored, severely ignored topic, which is Christianity in the Northeast. Namaste Sudhakar ji, welcome to the show. So there is this narrative that says that the Northeast is predominantly a Christian region. Is that true?
It is indeed true, but it depends on how you actually look at. For instance, if you look at the whole Northeast, Assam has about 3.5 crore population, which is predominantly Hindu. So the percentage-wise, the Christian population would seem to be less. But if you look at the only hilly regions like the Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, and the northern parts, the tribal parts of Tripura, and then Meghalaya and Arunachal Pradesh, it's a predominantly tribal-dominated area where the Christianity, its presence, is staggeringly high. And there are states, small states though, Nagaland, Mizoram. These two states have more than 80% Christianity. In fact, the percentage of Christians in Mizoram is said to be around 95%. It's quite high. And even in Meghalaya, Shillong and Tura have non-tribal population, but among the tribal population, the percentage would be as high as 65 to 70%. So these are the areas where the Christianity is present in a very predominant position. In Arunachal Pradesh also, the Christianity is growing fast. Around 30 to 35% of the population of Arunachal Pradesh is now Christianized. For long it was believed that Arunachal was free of Christianity, but today the situation has changed. There are about 30 to 35% Christians even in Arunachal Pradesh.
So how did you get all these insights into Northeast? Can we begin there?
Yeah, I worked in Northeast for about even as a student, Northeast was always in flames. It was in the news always for the wrong reasons. There was some bomb blast here, some insurgency there, some convoy attacked at some place, and some agitation over language happening somewhere. So Northeast was always in the news for the wrong reasons, and as students, activist students, it was a point of concern, a thing of concern for us.
What do you mean by activist?
I was a student activist. I was associated with a lot of student organizations, and they were focused mainly on the security-related, nationalism-related aspects. Particularly, there was an ideological battle going on between national forces and the forces that believed in foreign ideologies. So it is in this context that Northeast, because of its strategic position, was important for us, and we always used to get the bad news from those areas, agitations, bunds, blasts, so on and so forth. So we started studying it, and luckily for me, I had an opportunity to go there, work there for about 12 years in the interiors of the Northeast. So it was my first-hand exposure to Northeast that has actually given me a wider perspective as to why this is an unstable area, why this is a problem area. So a lot of it has got to do with the proselytization activities in the hilly regions, and also the influence that the church had on the young groups of militants, how it was controlling the narrative, how it was actually preparing a narrative for the world, how the people started looking at Northeast as a tinderbox where the government of India was out to obliterate Christianity. In fact, Nehru, one of the most adored icons of secularism, was accused of being anti-Christian in Northeast, and that was picked up by the British and the European media, even the US media. In fact, the headquarters of some of the Naga insurgents were in England. Some of their top leaders used to reside in England, so they were able to set a narrative. So that was how we got interested in Northeast, and that's how our personal stay and wide travel in that region also has given us a lot of insights about Northeast.
So you would agree with the line that it's predominantly Christian?
It is indeed predominantly Christian in the hill regions.
But there are also some pockets where there is a Hindu majority.
Yes, for example in Manipur. Manipur is a very interesting state. Manipur is a square-shaped state where the center is Hindu. Center is thickly populated. The population density is very high. The periphery, the fringe, is Christianized. All the majority of the tribals have been Christianized. So the fringe of Manipur is Christianized. The center is Hinduized. Typically Vaishnavite, they sport those tilaks and chandan and all those things, and they wear those dhotis, and every night you would hear Ras Leela. This is something that the people outside do not even know. For them, whole of the Northeast is Christianized.
Right. I mean, with talking of Manipur, that seems like an interesting demography, interesting layout of demography. So, has anybody tried to study why the center of Manipur is Hindu and the borders, surrounding are all bordered by Christian?
The Manipuri community is known as Meitei community. Locally it is called Meitei community. The Meiteis are, they have been brought closer to the Vaishnavism by a Vaishnavite sant called Garib Nawaz. He came to Manipur around 15th century and then he started preaching. So that part of Manipuri, the Meitei population, majority of the Meitei population has turned to Vaishnavism. So the Vaishnavism flourishes, the worship of Radha, Krishna flourishes there. But the tribal regions have always had a very interesting relationship with the core. The king used to be from the core, but he used to have his own vassals all across, and these different tribals used to pay their tribute, and the king used to assure their protection. It was only in the later part of 1890s, early 19th century, 1910, 1915, that the Christianity started coming. So the interesting issue is the tribals and non-tribals had a very cordial relationship during the pre-Christian period, pre-British period. Before the advent of British period, all these tribal vassals used to report to the king, and they were given huge respect in the darbars, in the courts of the kings, Ahom kings. For instance, whenever Ahom kings had problems from enemies, from within or from outside, they used to first run towards the Nagas. Same is the case with Manipur. So in these two places, the core non-tribal Hindu majority used to depend on the tribals. It was not like the tribals were totally isolated from the non-tribals. So tribal, non-tribal separation is a construct that has come after the British and the Christians have entered.
So how did the missionaries actually set foot in the Northeast?
It was in 1805 that the first missionary went to Northeast. Welsh Calvinistic missions were the first one to enter there. Initially, it goes to the credit of the missionaries that the first 6 or 7 missionaries who went to Nagaland, they were simply slayed. Nagas were headhunters. Headhunting was a matter of pride for them, tradition for them. So the missionaries were killed. But despite that, the missionaries kept on going and kept on befriending them and started slowly trying to influence. It took quite some time for them. But more than the missionary endeavor, it was the British who has actually helped the spread of Christianity. After 1857 War of Independence, the Sepoy mutiny that the history talks about, there were few things that the British did. First thing, they tried to insulate areas which did not see major wars against the Britishers. The tribal areas Some tribal areas had unrest, but majority of the tribal northeast did not have any unrest or did not have any rebellion directly against the Britishers. So they insulated the tribals from the non-tribals. So ensured that the non-tribal influence does not fall on the tribals. So they brought in what is known as inner line permit system. Northeastern Frontier Regulation Act. They have enacted this in 1873. 1873 onwards, the movement of the non-tribals into the tribal area or the tribals into the non-tribal area has been completely stopped. So you have to take a permission, you have to take a permit to enter into area that falls into the inner line. Naturally, the people from rest of the country did not go, and the people from Assam and other places, Manipuris, they stopped going. And the tribals were left to themselves. That was when the missionaries had the field run. There was no opposition for them. There was no other influence.
Was that a deliberate move on the part of
It was a deliberate move. It was a deliberate move of driving a wedge between the tribal and non-tribal communities. One, sowing distrust between the two communities. Two, thirdly, because the tribals were disorganized as far as the religious practices are concerned. They are not an organized religion the way the Hindu religion is. So, disorganized or unorganized religions are the easiest prey to Christianity.
Correct. I mean, I wouldn't call Hinduism an organized religion either.
But then it still has
Better
a system.
yeah.
It still has a system. It still has a couple of books, and it still has dharma gurus. It still has its own system of
in
temples.
relative terms. Okay.
In relative terms, even Hinduism is a unorganized religion that way. More than being unorganized, it is a very diverse and very democratic religion.
Okay.
When it comes to the tribals, the religion was, very unorganized, and they were left to themselves. What the Britishers did was, they exploited the fault lines between the tribals, and they targeted small communities and started converting them. And the first converts in most communities were in 1870s, 1860s, immediately after the inner line regulations have come into force. Prior to that, they were isolated, sporadic conversions, and even those converts were unable to go to their villages. And the earlier conversions, most of them have relapsed back into the original religion that they belong to. For instance, in the Garos, the first two converts, Obed and Ramki, the first convert was Obed and second one was Ramki. Both of them have relapsed back into the religion that they used to practice before becoming Christians. Indigenous religion, let us say indigenous religion. So Obed lapsed immediately, Ramki took some time to lapse.
As a community? As an entire community or some
Individually,
individuals?
it was individuals who went. Initially, it was an individual who got converted. So when one or two persons were converted, they were excommunicated. They had to live in the missionary campuses. They became dependent on the missionary setup. This has happened everywhere. In fact, even in Andhra Pradesh also, early converts, they were dependent on the doles given by the church. It is from this that the expression rise back Christians comes.
Yes.
Later on, when the group started making, move towards Christianity, then things became different. Communities started arising. But in Northeast, earlier conversions were all individual. For instance, the Karbi tribe, which lives in the central Assam, on the southern side of Brahmaputra. Karbis are a very powerful, strong tribe. And the first convert was Rangbong. His name was Rangbong, Rongbong, B-O-N-G. And this man went back to the indigenous faith immediately within a matter of few days. First, because he was ostracized. He couldn't live without the support of the church. Then his whole kith and kin were in some other part. So all these things have prompted him to go back.
Go back to?
Indigenous faith.
Okay.
So that's how the whole issue of, initially the converts were isolated, sporadic, individual incidents. Later it became a group movement. It was only when the whole movement became a group movement, conversion became a group movement, things began changing. Christian villages started sprouting up. See, if there's one Christian, you can excommunicate him. But when there are 10 or 15, they can constitute a village of their own and they can start living as a
Yes.
community.
So, going back to this isolation that was carried out by
Yeah.
the British, was it a political agenda or a religious?
It was both. Because after the isolation was effected, after the inner line regulations were brought, only people who were allowed into the Naga territory, Mizo territory, or the Khasi Garo territory, or even some parts of Arunachal Pradesh. Of course, Arunachal, the Britishers have always tried to keep it aside. Even the periphery of the Manipur were Christian missionaries. The softer face of European power was there among them. They won the confidence and then they gradually started converting people and started making individual churches and then communities.
So, how did the locals take it? How did the tribals take it? What was their fight back? Did they resist it, or was it very easy for the missionaries?
See, the tribals basically are independent loving. They are fiercely independent. They were never subjugated even by the Hindu kings. They only had a cordial relationship. So when the Britishers came, they felt their independence was curbed. And some of the most fierce battles against the British were from the tribal communities. No tribal community has taken the British supremacy lying down. And you would be surprised, the last battle against the Britishers from a tribal community in Northeast was in 1934. Till 1934, they were waging a war. Particularly, there are three Naga tribes, Ziliang, Liangmai and Rangmei. Put together, they are known as Ziliangrang. This Ziliangrang tribe, led by a very charismatic woman leader by name Ranima Gaidinliu. Gaidinliu led them to in a battle against the Britishers, and this battle went on till 1934. She was imprisoned for 14 years, and there were many attempts to convert her. So the tribals have never accepted the British domination. The Khamti tribals, they fought till 1920s, and the Kuki rebellion was there till 1904, 1905. So all these tribals, they have fought the Britishers. So the conversion also was staunchly opposed. Lot of it has gone unrecorded because we have never recorded our own history in that way, and our interaction with the Naga and other communities has been a very late interaction. But the British officers and missionaries have recorded their initial interaction and the initial opposition of the tribal communities to the British rule as well as conversion. They never viewed both the things as different. For them, the proselytizer and the administrator were not different.
Right. I mean, but if you go by the numbers that we have today of the Northeast, number of Christians in the Northeast, it seems like the tribals just gave in and did not resist, and it was very easy for the missionaries. Do you be able to talk about any specific instances of tribal resistance?
The tribal resistance has actually been a very long battle. For instance, by the time India gained independence and the British left, none of the states had a 90% population. Even Mizoram, which is the most populous Christian state, had only 40 to 50% Christians. Most conversions happened after the Britishers have left and the government has forsaken the tribals. So the tribals have resisted the Britishers very strongly. There were 3 or 4 major ways. They never trusted a white man. For instance, there is an account by Reverend Clark, who was gone into the Naga territory for the first time. And when he went and he tried to preach them, the Nagas gathered and then they said, "We know who you are, Sahib. You are a white Sahib. You are an agent of the company," they said. So they could identify, they could realize that the man who's proselytizing them is a friend of the man who is ruling them. So they said, "You are a company's man." Company is East India Company. So this was the term they used, and they said, sooner or later, you would carry out the orders of the Maharaja. They used the word Maharaja. That's the word that the Reverend Clark's account uses. Similarly, there is another missionary, very famous missionary, Edward Payson Scott. He has worked among the Karbi tribes. His accounts, which are available with the Baptist societies, say that when he went to preach to the Karbis, the Karbis have said that this man is an agent of Maharani, meaning Victoria, Queen Victoria, and he will take away our children and then send them to bondage forever. So the tribals never differentiated between the British and the proselytizer, the missionary. So everywhere there was opposition. There was physical opposition to the British rule. There was also physical opposition, fierce opposition that way, against the proselytizers. Several proselytizers were attacked by the tribals, and they excommunicated whoever got converted, and security had to be provided to the churches, huge compounds, tall gate, walls, very elevated protection systems had to be there. Most of these churches and the mission compounds were built atop hillocks to ensure that they can ward off the attack and they can get advance notices. So this way there was opposition, and they prevented missionaries from entering the villages. In many cases, there are many organizations. The first organized opposition to Christianity was in 1893. Inner Line came in 1872-73. First mass conversions happened after that, and within 20 years in Meghalaya, 1893, Seng Khasi, an organization was formed to oppose the Christianity. Seng means pure. So they considered their religion to be pure and Christianity to be impure. In all the tribal languages of Northeast, they have a word for converted people. Converted people are either called impure or idiots. These are the words. For example, the Karbi people call converts as Chomang. Chomang means is an outsider. He is not one of us. So one who converts is not part of my society. The same way, the Angamis used to call, Angami is a Naga tribe. Nagas is a generic term. There are 14 tribes within Nagaland. So they are all known as Nagas, but each one has its own distinct identity. The Angami Nagas used to call the converts as No Krako, which means idiot. So they have either this name or that name for those who have got converted. So there was opposition, there was ostracization, there was the us and them perception among the people. So it is a fallacy to think that Northeast was a walkover for the Christians. They had to struggle hard. They had to fight every inch of the way to convert people. And whenever possible, there were relapses. And the Baptist Church of North India in 1956, if I remember correctly, 1956, they had a report. They had a meeting in a place called Phek, P-H-E-K in Nagaland, where they were taking stock of the progress of the conversion. And the report says, very interestingly, it says that the opposition to Christianity is gaining momentum, and there are a lot of relapses into the indigenous faith. They use the word animistic faith. So
this was a report
published by the Baptist churches.
Okay, so how true is that? Because today they say the percentage is like way lower than the official figure, right? I mean the actual figure. The official figure is way lower than the actual figure. So, why do you think this narrative was true?
What you said is true for South India, where there are a lot of converts, but there is a huge section of crypto-Christians who are hiding their Christianity. They are hiding their religion and they are passing off as Hindus to claim the benefits that accrue to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. This is happening in Tamil Nadu, this is happening in Kerala, this is happening in Karnataka. But in case of Northeast, it is a question of domination. So the numbers were always touted, and a Christian majority has never been concealed. because they always had the patronage of the Britishers. British army was protecting them, British government was protecting them. So Christianity has always flaunted its numbers in Northeast, unlike in South India, where they are trying to hide their religious belief just to grab the benefits that come for the scheduled caste. So Northeast, it's different. They always flaunted their numbers, and whenever there are relapses, going backs, they were worried, and they have mentioned this. So Donald McGavran says that the tribal structures are the most difficult structures to penetrate. Once you penetrate, they become your shields. So the Nagas, the Mijos, the Khasis, Garos, and all these tribes, Tankals and different tribes, they were very resistant to Christianity, and this saga has never been recorded. We get whatever little information that we get from the Christian records. Of course, Christians keep a very meticulous record of whatever they have done. So it is through their reports and through their accounts that we get an inkling or a sense of the kind of fight that the tribals have waged. But there are movements like the movement of Ranima Gaidenlu, like the movement of Senkhasi, like several other movements which have fought Christianity, which have fought the attempts to convert them and then protect and preserve their own culture. So it was a long fight that the tribal communities did not give up that easily. They fought for nearly 40 or 50 years. It was only after independence that the government started following a very ambivalent policy towards the Northeast. It did not realize the strategic importance of the area and did not understand the implications of the massive conversions that were going on. And it was then that the missionaries also had a field day. Missionary records say that after 1947, most of the missionary organizations have wound up their activities in Northeast, and they were ready to go back to their countries of origin. But when they realized that the government would not interfere with their activities and would continue with the inner line system, so they again restarted their work. So it was in this period that most of the government did not understand the tribals and their sensibilities, their problems, their issues. And the missionaries already had a presence, and they managed to capitalize on the situation. The maximum conversions that have happened are after 1947. You would see that the rate of conversion has grown all across Northeast, except perhaps Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal is a different story. So the conversion, speed of conversion has gone up.